In October of 1949, 3 Marianist sisters, Mother Pilar, Sister Amelia, and Sister Marina, arrived in Somerset, Texas from Spain to establish the first community of the Daughters of Mary Immaculate in the United States. These 3 Marianist sisters were welcomed by Father William Lamb, a Marianist priest and pastor of St. Mary's Church. It has been 75 years since the Marianist Sisters foundation in the United States, and there is no doubt that the influence of those 3 founding sisters lives on today. The Marianist Sisters in the U.S. now have communities in San Antonio, Texas, and Dayton, Ohio. Their mission is to participate in faith communities, help build a church and society where all are included, respond to the poverties of our time, especially economic poverty, remain active with concerns of women, and maintain a global perspective while educating themselves and others regarding the interconnectedness of our global society. We are grateful for the continued commitment and contributions of the Marianist Sisters within the Marianist family. In honor of the 75th anniversary of their foundation, we are happy to share this interview from February of 2024 with Sister Gretchen Trautman, who has been serving as the provincial for the Marianist Sisters U.S. Province since 2017. She resides in San Antonio, Texas, and is originally from Dayton, Ohio.
I was a Julianne girl, so we went to the sock hops and the football games at Chaminade because the 2 schools had not yet merged. So I knew Marianist men because of my brothers and cousins, male cousins, that went to the all-boys school, and so I knew Marianist life. When the time came for me to pick a college, I looked at Kentucky, I looked at Indiana, but gee, right there in Dayton, Ohio was the University of Dayton, so it was a good choice for me. And I could live at home and, help my mom and dad and my brothers and stuff. My faith had been important to me even in high school. I was in sodality. The Julianne sodality and the Chaminade sodalities at times did do things together. So it just seemed natural. Go and join the sodality out at the University of Dayton. I'd say key folks that I remember from that time would have been Beale, Larry Cada, and certainly Sister Mary Louise Foley. So we had little faith-sharing clusters within the sodality, and Mary Louise Foley was mine. So I think she gets credit for my vocation, to tell you the truth, because she was the first Marianist sister I had met, and that was a lifelong relationship from then on. So I also got to know the sisters because they lived at that time. The community residence was in the basement of Marycrest Hall. This was before our sisters had homes off of campus. But I also worked in the research center on the other side of the basement of Marycrest Hall. And so for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, we did different projects over there. So I hung out a lot in the dorm, not because I lived in Marycrest, but just because it was a place to sit and study or grab a bite before I went to work or back to class. So it was good to hang out and met the sisters. They invited me to meals. They invited me to pray with them and go see the movie Sound of Music. And it somehow at that point, I was thinking religious life, but way in the back, because I certainly had been dating and, thinking of marriage and all that good stuff too. But in the meantime, so in sodality, also instrumental was Father Phil Holly. And if you were in sodality, you didn't just come to the little sharing groups, the basic Christian community at that time, or, attend Mass or something. It was expected that you have an apostolic mission or duty, that you were doing something. And so each sodalist had to pick something. Well, I picked going to work at Dakota Street Center. And Phil Holly is key. He started that back in the 60s. So by the time I came along in 65, 66 as a college student looking for a ministry, I picked that one because it was a latchkey program at that time to work with after-school kids, after-school care. In my mind, I remember a very old building, wood frame, 2-story. It burned down in 1974. And if you look up Dakota Street Center now, you will not find Dakota Street, but you will find Dakota Center. I think it's on Barnett. It's huge. And what we did is latchkey and after-school care. Now you see the Golden Senior Age Program. It's an educational center for the west side of Dayton. It's huge. And so I look at that as a taste of what Marianist life meant to me. It was the support of my personal prayer. It was also just fun because, I mean, to join Sodality was fun. And the other part of it I remember is even between classes when I wasn't in class or up in the basement of Mary Crest Hall, we had the hut. And on campus, we had an old Army building, really old. And the walls weren't even insulated. I mean, it was just that simple. And it was called the hut. So peers for me would have been like Jim Vogt. So I'm thinking Margie West Kavanaugh, Tim Phillips. There's an era there of many people who have gone on to be in state community or in other ways, many like MSJC became great torchbearers. And so that Marianist spirit caught a number of people in my era. And some of us joined religious life, and some of them moved on to their own path in life, but the Marianist Charism was deep. So I joined Marianist Sisters from that experience, feeling good about the community. A little leap of faith here, because I lived in Dayton, Ohio. I had never been on a plane. I had never visited San Antonio. Texas was 1,500 miles away. So when the time came for me to join religious life, and I wrote and asked, may I come? So I wrote in January. I got the letter in August, about 2 weeks before I was expected. So I didn't know the sisters in San Antonio, but I got on that plane and came all the way to San Antonio. People had bets on me. Maybe she'll last 3 weeks, maybe 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Well, it's 50 plus years later.
Showed that.
And still going strong. So, but that I think is, in terms of my origins of Marianist and getting a taste for it. And that has certainly continued with a sense of lay and religious mixing, the collaboration, the efforts, just being part of something, being part of Dakota Street Center, and then seeing it go, like really become something, as many of our institutions and entities have in the Marianist world. But I think, for me to be part of just a little piece of something that was so good, that's where it started.
I'm curious if you can describe a little bit about what the Sodality looked like when you were a part of it.
Well, after school in Julian High School, weekly meeting, probably about an hour. I don't remember exactly, but there would be times where we would have topics and small group discussions, presenters, things on that nature. I don't remember at Julianne doing projects much. I mean, we did like bring in license plates, old license plates. I mean, there were things that we did at that time, but it wasn't like going out and doing something. It was more things that we did and then in the school that might benefit somebody else. That was different when you got to UD. And honestly, I don't remember what other people picked as their apostolic mission or ministry. I just know that one was, I was also thinking of being a teacher. So that it was natural for me. But others might have been like, oh, we'll become basketball coaches for the neighborhood kids down the street or something. And we were helping youth. I mean, I remember that much. But it could be, in that day, what would have been a food bank or something like that. But I wasn't doing much else other than that one thing.
So all the members of the Sodality, all the students who were part of that had an apostolic mission.
It was expected. It was like filling this line, kind of expected. What will you do for others? What service, I guess. It would be in terms of mission and charism and service. All those kind of came together. So nobody hit me over the head with a hammer and said Chaminade's mission was this, that, and the other. But we knew sodality was a part of Chaminade's method. But people in his sodality were in their own pockets in life, wherever they were, if they were studying, but also if they were tradesmen or chimney sweeps or whatever it was. How were they? They were little apostles, missionary apostles. And they were there in their milieu to preach. And they didn't necessarily use words, as St. Francis would say. The best gospel you might preach may never be words. Our lives were the way we influenced others and showed that. So that's what I remember about structure, and that we did have little, what you call cells or little groups. And we had like a moderator. Moderator was the word, not facilitator. So Sister Mary Louise Foley was my moderator. And there were all these other groups with moderators, and all the moderators were either Marianist men or women, vowed religious.
So those groups had an apostolic mission, a moderator, and they would come together for what
like
we
a
might call faith
meeting.
sharing?
Yeah.
Okay.
But in college, there were clubs, all kinds of clubs. And this was just a spiritual apostolic club on campus, as there would be others. And so we had regular times together in our little groups, but then times where we came together in the chapel and
as a large group.
Yeah, as a large group, and supported each other. So I think what I was looking for was the personal support for my spirituality, my growth, a challenge to really live my faith. But then it became more than that. And then you get involved in the ministry, and just the bug bit me to be a Marianist.
You mentioned that there was a point that the thought of being a religious sister was in the back of your mind. I think you may have said the way back.
Way back.
But I'm wondering what brought that to the forefront, and then what did that process of becoming a sister look like?
Okay, 10 years old, Christmas gift, I wanted a nun doll. Okay. And they actually had them. And so we've got I'm sitting on the couch looking like Merry Christmas, and I'm holding my nun doll. And that's when I was 10 years old and enamored with the sisters of St. Francis of Indiana that were teaching me then. And I just thought that was the greatest thing. So by the time I was in 8th grade, you could sign up to be in a little club that you wanted to be a sister. Well, then I went on to Julian, and then I wanted to be a Notre Dame sister. All right, that didn't work out. My mother was very ill for a number of years. And so that was just like an impossibility. So I went on to college. And I have to tell you, out there somewhere, I hope Gary Welschenbach is very happy. But we were dating pretty seriously. And he asked me if I would come up to Sandusky, Ohio, and meet his family. And, I could just feel it coming. And I thought, he's going to ask me to get married. Kicked me into gear. And I thought, well, you can't get married and then decide it's not your thing. But you can go to religious life, find out. And if it's not, then you go back and fight Gary. So that was the catalyst in November. When he asked me for Thanksgiving to come and meet his family. That's when I wrote the letter in January. And they didn't answer, and they didn't answer. Well, then I thought, well, God, look, you had your chance. And I tried. And if they don't want me, that's just fine. Well, don't ask me why Sister Maria Blanca didn't write back for all those months. Yeah. But eventually, I think God gets you where he wants you. That's one of my life mantras. And that, we see things, and there's invitations, and there's relationships, and those form us. Those choices truly make us find our path, and it's God's way. And so another one of my mantras would be the voice of others is very often the voice of God calling you. And that one stuck, and I don't know why, but I was pretty young when that one hit me. But I would say those kinds of things, God calls you, other people inviting you to do something, other people seeing something in you, and you would never, ever, ever have asked it of yourself. That would be me. Then more has been made out of me than I would have ever made out of myself. So the thought of like, was I going to be a teacher or was I going to be a nurse? Because both of those jobs, you can raise kids because your shifts can, So in my head, I think I would have made a good wife and mother, but it was not my path. But those were the things I was seriously considering. Why would I want to, do this? I think it's a rare 0.000% of the human race that would choose to say, God is so important to me that every day I'm going to have time with God, that I'm going to not just have time with God, because you can do that married, you can do that single, but I'm going to set aside my life and say, whatever is God's design, what is it that I should do? What is my role? And I'll be a little part of something, just a little. I wasn't planning much. I mean, it was just like, whatever they tell me to do, I'll do it. And I had no design in my head when I became a sister. And if they say, do this, get a degree, could you do this? You feel the need. And that would be how I was brought into Marianist world. So I've done a whole bunch of things. I've had a lot of careers. But in time, you look back on it and you think, all those were stepping stones. You can see the hand that initiated the path. So I look back and that's where it came from. And I hope Gary's happy somewhere out there.
You talked about a lot of those voices of others. Was there maybe a particular person that was making that invitation that sticks out to you? The invitation to become a sister?
To be a sister, certainly Mary Louise Foley, and I don't think it was ever, would you become a sister, but it was just her personal friendship with me. Once I got into religious life, it was like, well, I thought I was going to be an English teacher in high school. Never happened. So it would be Sister Maria Blanca who I would say, okay, so you're going to become a teacher at St. James Grade School. The day after you finish vows, we're going to put you over there and you're going to teach. And so things like that. So it would be Sister Maria Blanca who also said, we think you should get a master's degree. I would never have asked. I just don't know that. Maybe I would have in time, but those kinds of leads, somebody saying, this is what we would like you to do. That's an obedience in religious life. But it's like you go where the need or the call is and whatever the group needed. So things like that. I would say the largest and hugest change in my life would be when we were at the General Chapter in 2012. And we were getting ready to vote for officers for the General Council. I was stunned because I got votes. And I have a good mouth, as you can tell. I can talk. So I must have said something that somebody thought, oh, she should be on the General Council. So to get votes like that, it was very, very, how would I say, the impact is not so much on me, but our province in the United States is small. Small. And small but mighty. We're doing the right things. So I would say that's the hardship. When you listen to the voice of others and you realize the impact is not just on you, but what does this mean? I said, I just can't say right now. Well, okay, overnight, you pray about it, you think about it, you discern, and the vote, so it's around 2. And then you get the votes and they say, okay, now you have to say yes or no. And so again, it's just, do you hear the voice of the Spirit? And you say, this is something God wishes, God wants, this is God's design. Or do you hear the other sister saying, don't you dare. We can't, I said yes. But the impact was hard. And so I feel that, like it is a discernment when those moments come. Because you can say, I don't think so. I think I have to go back to the United States. But that really, in a way, it changed my life, but I would say it was in my head an explosion of understanding the international congregation or the global Marianist family. I did not, it's like the little girl from Dayton, Ohio coming to San Antonio. That was an explosion of experience. This for me too. But I felt like, well, I enrich the province by what I have experienced. I'm back here now after 2017, that term ended, and did not accept to run for a second term because of the need here. And that time I did say, don't keep my name on the ballot. It's just impossible. So I think we all have to look at what does God put in our path, who might be the person or the vote or job offer, restlessness within. There's all kinds of things that could move us into new territory. I'm certain that you too can say, if this meant, because of this, this happened. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have done this. Those are things I can look back on better and say, yeah, I think God was working.
The vote you're mentioning there at the general chapter, that was for, I know you spent time in the general administration for the Daughters of Mary Immaculate. That's what that vote
That was for 5 years.
Okay.
So then I became what we call head of temporalities, general treasurer. And I was one of 4 on that council. So it's the office system.
Sure.
We have a general superior, head of religious life, head of education, head of temporalities.
And I know you're currently the provincial for the U.S. province.
Right.
How have you seen the Marianist Charism impact your approach to leadership in those different roles?
Collaboration means more to me than it ever did before. So if I were maybe in my 40s or 50s, it was nice to be in family Mary groups here in San Antonio, and I was in Dayton, Ohio, and here too. But I think once you've touched the World Council of the Marianist Family and you see how it is thriving, what's going on, we're in 19 countries now. It was 16 countries when I was on council, but we've expanded. I know that the Marianist men are in 30, almost 40 countries. The Marianist lay people are in even more. And thousands of Marianist lay people across the globe. We're hundreds is FMIs, but when I go in my head and I think back in the day, in the 1800s, you have Adele, who was sort of like me, walking around thinking about being a religious, got a proposal of marriage, took a couple weeks to decide and said no and became our founders. You have Chaminade building in his mind. Also, I think I want to start a religious order. He was a priest. Their little dreams didn't come together for a long time. In 1819, I think Adele started correspondence because she heard her association of young women like a sodality and his sodality going on in Bordeaux. Somebody introduced her to the thought that, oh, did you hear about him? He's doing it. She wrote the first correspondence to get the two of them communicating, and that happened for about 10 years before they met face to face, and they merged in more than one way, not just Adele's association and his sodality, but they merged the vision of starting a family, a charismatic family with lay and religious, and it happened. We're here 200 plus years later, and their dream, their vision that started just by accident continues. And I'm a little dust piece in that beautiful stream. To be part of something like that lifts me. And so if I look back and I think, where are we going? What is this Marianist family? It's how do we do it together? How do we support, build on, initiate, the motivate? It's together. So because alone we can't do much. A little group of women here, but with others. And we stand shoulder to shoulder. So I think that's something about equality that you see in the Marianist. You see it in the brothers and priests. We talk about that. But you also see it with equal voice. So you get to the World Council and those voices at the table. There's 4 branches there because they also have the Alliance Mariale. But the voices of the lay people and the religious are equal. Now, there's national. I'm on a national council. I'm on the regional. You see all those levels, and you think the gift is there. That charismatic family that started by accident a couple centuries ago, that to me is what, if anything, has made me expand in my concept of leadership. And whether I'm leading, I'm not so sure if it, but to be a part of is maybe the word. Leadership for me means to be collaborating and be a part of something, and lead by doing and showing and working with. So that maybe is what's changed. The concept, the very definition of leadership, is an experience of working together.
What would you say is a hope you have for the Marianist family?
When I think about that, I'm gonna twist it a little bit for you.
Okay.
Because I think, what is my hope? I'm like gonna throw this one back at you. It's, what does God hope for us to have in 25 years? What does God hope this Marianist family to be in 50 years or another 200 years? And I would think that my hope would be it's continued long after me. But my little investment has encouraged or brought somebody to it, not just myself, but that I've been able to influence. And there's definitely a feeling I have that you pass on the gift to others, that others have continued the gift, and that it exists and it's bigger, stronger, thriving, and in the church serving a mission that I think the church really needs today.
We know that the Marianist founders corresponded through letter writing. So if you were going to write anyone, dead or alive, a letter and be guaranteed a response, who would you write to, and what would be the topic?
I would write my father. In my journey in life, he certainly was a great influence. As I mentioned, my mother was sick. So my dad had a lot to do with my 3 younger brothers. And he was so strong in his faith. And I can remember conversations with him as a young girl. And he wasn't Catholic in the beginning, he was Lutheran. And I learned a lot about Lutheran songs, and their coloring books had Jesus, and the Catholics didn't even have a coloring book with Jesus. I mean, but he taught me a lot, but he converted to Catholicism too. But his faith was very important to him in bringing us up as Catholic. And so he definitely had challenges, but he would say, "Oh, Gretchen, I've certainly been pushed to the brink. I feel that God has put me right on the edge of the cliff, but he's never pushed me over yet." So my dad's faith was very strong, but he felt God was challenging him, us, all of us. And so I think of moments where he taught me things besides that. Or I'd see him out, and I'm a teenager, and I see him out in the garage, and he's got the old Western Flyer sled. And we had outgrown it, but my older cousin, Ed, had kids now, and my dad had gotten it down, and he was steel wooling the runners and painting it red and doing all this. What are you doing that for? Just give that thing to Ed and tell him to do it. Gretchen, it's the right thing to do. And so his moves through life, no matter what it was, just as simple as, without any fanfare, you better believe that it's the right thing to do. That's another life mantra. But those are times where I think, what would he say to me now? I've outlived his years. I'm older than he was, so his wisdom lives on in me. But I'd love to hear what he'd have to say about me now.
Yeah, sure.
And say, well, this is what you need to know for this time of your life, because it's a very different time. And he lived through those years. So, I'd love to hear his insights. He was a beautiful soul, very much the core of my faith, too, I think. My grandmother and, others, but he was pretty significant in my personality, but also my faith.